Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Brendan Moyer's Playwright Corner, where I read plays, poems, or whatever's currently striking my fancy at the moment. Today we're going to be reading a play by Strindberg entitled The Creditors, which is a tragicomedy in one act. The characters are Tekla, Adolf, her husband, a painter, Gustav, her divorced husband, a schoolmaster traveling under an assumed name, as well as some non-speaking parts appearing once briefly. The scene is a sitting room in a hotel at a Swedish watering place in the 80s. Again, 1880s. At the back, a door to a veranda with a view of the landscape. On the right, a door leading to another room. Center right, a table with newspapers on it, and beyond that, a sofa. To the left, a chair beside a small modeling stand. Gustav is sitting on the sofa, smoking a cigar. Adolf is at the modeling stand, working on a wax figure. His crutches stand beside him. Adolf. And for all this, I have you to thank. Gustav, putting out his cigar. Oh, nonsense. But certainly. For the first days after my wife went off on this trip, I just lay on the sofa, unable to do anything but long for her. It was as if she had taken my crutches with her, so I couldn't move at all. Then when I'd slept for a couple of days, I came to and began to pull myself together. My mind, which had been working deliriously, began to calm down. Old thoughts that I had had in the past rose up again. The desire to work, to create, came back, and my eyes regained their old power of looking at things truthfully and boldly. And then you turned up. Gustav. You were wretched enough when I first met you, I admit, and you had to use your crutches, but that doesn't make me responsible for your recovery. You needed a rest, and you needed male company. Adolf. Yes, that's true enough. Like everything you say. I used to have men as friends in the old days, but after I was married, they seemed superfluous. I was content with the one person I had chosen. Then I found myself in new circles where I made many acquaintances, but my wife was jealous of them. She wanted to have me to herself, but she also wanted to have my friends to herself. And so I was left alone with my jealousy. You're given to that disease, aren't you? I was afraid of losing her and tried to prevent it. Was that unreasonable? But I was never afraid of her being unfaithful. A married man never is afraid of that. No. Isn't it extraordinary? But what I was afraid of was that these friends would get an influence over her, and so indirectly have a power over me. And that I couldn't stand. So your opinions differed. Your wife's and yours. Having heard so much, you'd better hear it all. My wife has an independent nature. What are you smiling at? Go on. She has an independent nature, so she won't accept my ideas, only everybody else's. Adolf, after a pause. Yes. It really has seemed as if she hated my ideas just because they were mine, and not because she found them preposterous. You see, quite often she has brought out some former opinion of mine and forced it on everyone as her own. Yes, and then, on another occasion, when some friend of mine passed on views he had already gotten directly from me, she'd think them fine. Everything was fine as long as it didn't come from me. In other words, you are not very happy. Yes, I am happy. I have the person I chose, and I have never wanted anything else. And never wanted to be free? No, I can't say that. At times it has seemed to me that it would be, well, a rest to be free. But the moment she leaves me, I am consumed with need for her as I need my own arms and legs. It's really extraordinary. I sometimes feel she isn't a separate being at all, but an actual part of me. An intestine that carries away my will, my will to live. It's as if I'd given into her keeping my very solar plexus that autonomists talk of. Perhaps, by and large, that is what has happened. And where would we be then? After all, she's an independent being with a mind of her own. And when I first met her, I was just a boy artist whose education she took in hand. But before long, you were shaping her thoughts and educating her, weren't you? No. She stopped growing and I went on. Yes, it's curious how her writing deteriorated after that first book, or anyhow, it did not improve. But that time she had an easy subject. It's supposed to be a portrait of her husband, you know. Did you ever meet him? He seems to have been a bit of an idiot. I've never met him because he'd gone away for 6 months, but he must have been a prize idiot to judge from her description. Adolf. And her description was accurate. You can be sure of that. I am. But why did she take him? Because she didn't know him. People never do seem to know one another until afterwards. Then people shouldn't marry until afterwards. But he was a tyrant, of course. Of course? Well, all married men are like that. And you not least. I? Who allow my wife to come and go as she pleases? Oh, then you certainly are the least. Perhaps you ought to lock her up. Do you like her spending whole nights away? No, I certainly do not. You see? Turning. Actually, you'd be ridiculous if you did. Ridiculous? Can a man be ridiculous because he trusts his wife? Certainly he can. And you already are. Utterly ridiculous. What? That's the last thing I mean to be. Don't get so excited. You'll have another attack. And why isn't she ridiculous when I spend nights away? Why? That's no concern of yours. That's how it is. And while you're wondering why, there's your disaster. What disaster? Well, her husband was a tyrant and she took him as if to get her freedom. A girl can only get that by providing herself with a chaperone. In other words, a husband. Of course. And now you are the chaperone. I? Well, you're her husband, aren't you? Adolf looks bewildered. Isn't that right? Adolf, uneasily. I don't know. You live with a woman for years and you never think about her or your relationship with her, and then suddenly you begin to wonder and the whole thing starts... Gustav, you are my friend. The only friend I have of my own sex. You've been like a watchmaker, mending the works in my head and winding up the spring again. Can't you hear for yourself how much clearer my thoughts are and how lucidly I'm talking? And it seems to me that my voice has got back its old ring. Yes, I think it has. I wonder why. Perhaps one gets used to lowering one's voice when talking to a woman. Certainly Tekla always used to accuse me of shouting. So you lowered your voice and bowed to the apron strings. Don't put it like that. It's worse than that. But let's talk about it now. Where was I? Yes, you came here and opened my eyes to the truth of my art. As a matter of fact, I had felt my interest in painting waning for some time, as paint didn't seem the right medium for what I wanted to express. But it was only when you gave me the reason for this and explained that painting could not be the proper form for creative art today that I saw the light and realized it would be impossible for me ever to work in color again. Are you really convinced that you won't paint anymore? That you won't have a relapse? Absolutely convinced. I've proved it. When I went to bed that night after we had had that conversation, I went through all of your arguments, point by point, and I knew you were right. But when I woke after a sound night's sleep with a clear head, it came to me in a flash that you might be mistaken. I jumped out of bed, grabbed my brushes, and began to paint. But it was all over. I no longer had any illusions. It was only daubs of paint, and I was amazed to think that I had believed and made others believe that a painted canvas was anything more than a painted canvas. The veil had fallen from my eyes, and it was just as impossible for me to go on painting as it was for me to become a child again. And then you realized that the naturalistic trend of today was in demand for realism, and tangibility could only find its proper form in sculpture, which gives you body, projection in 3 dimensions. The three dimensions. Yes, that's to say, body. And so you became a sculptor, or rather, you were one already. But you had gone astray, and it only needed a guide to put you on the right road. Tell me, are you getting great satisfaction now from your work? Now I'm living. May I see what you're doing? A female figure. Gustav, looking at it. And so lifelike. Adolf. Yes, but all the same, it's like someone. It's extraordinary how that woman is in my body, just as I'm in hers. Not really so extraordinary. You know what transfusion is? Blood transfusion? Yes. Well, you seem to have bled yourself. But looking at this figure, I understand several things I only suspected before. You have made love to her passionately. Yes, so passionately that I couldn't tell if it was she or I or she. When she smiles, I smile. When she weeps, I weep, and when she... Can you imagine it? When she was giving birth to our child, I felt the pains in my own body. You know, my dear friend, it gives me great pain to say this, but you have the first symptoms of epilepsy. What? How could you say such a thing? Well, I've seen the symptoms before, in a younger brother I had who indulged in amorous excess. How did it show itself, this thing? It was terrible to witness. If you're feeling it all week, I won't upset you by describing it. No, go on. Well, the boy had gotten himself married to an innocent young girl with curls and a dove's eyes. The face of a child and the soul of an angel. But nonetheless, she managed to usurp the prerogative of the male... What's that? Initiative, of course. With the result that the angel nearly carried him off to heaven. But first he had to be crucified and feel the nails in his flesh. It was horrible. But what happened? During the following passage, Gustav graphically illustrates his words, and Adolf listens so intently that he unconsciously imitates Gustav's gestures. We would be sitting talking, he and I, and when I'd been speaking for a while, his face would turn as white as chalk. His arms and legs would grow stiff, and his thumbs would be twisted into the palms of his hands, like this. Then his eyes would grow bloodshot, and he would begin to masticate. Like this, he gestures, imitated by Adolf. The saliva rattled in his throat. His chest was constricted as if in a vice. The pupils of his eyes flickered like gas jets. His tongue worked till he foamed at the mouth, and then he sank slowly down and backwards into his chair as if he were drowning. And then... Stop. And then... Are you ill? Yes. Gustav fetches a glass of water. There. Drink this, and we'll talk about something else. Thank you. Go on now. Well, then when he came to, he didn't remember anything at all. He had been completely unconscious. Has this ever happened to you? Well, I do have attacks of giddiness sometimes, but the doctor says it's anemia. Yes, but that's the beginning, you know. You must believe what I say. It will turn into epilepsy if you don't take care of yourself. What ought I to do, then? To begin with, you should practice complete sexual abstinence. How long for? 6 months at least. I can't do that. It would destroy our married life. Goodbye to you, then. Adolf, covering the wax figure. I couldn't do that. Not to save your life? But tell me, as you have taken me so far into your confidence, isn't there anything else, any secret wound that's troubling you? It's rare to find only one reason for discord when life is so varied and so rich in opportunities for destruction. Isn't there some skeleton in your cupboard that you're hiding from yourself? You said just now, for example, that you had a child which was sent away. Why doesn't it live with you? My wife didn't want it to. And her reason? Out with it. When the child was about 3 years old, it began to look like him. Her former husband. Ah. Have you seen her former husband? No, never. I just had a brief glance at a bad portrait, but I couldn't see any likeness. Portraits never are like the person anyway. And he may have changed since it was done. But I hope this didn't arouse your suspicions. Certainly not. The child was born a year after our marriage, and her husband was abroad when I first met Tekla here. In this very place, actually. In this house. That's why we come here every summer. Then you couldn't possibly have any suspicions. And you wouldn't need to in any case. For the children of a widow who remarries are often like her dead husband. It's vexing, of course. That's why they used to burn the widows in India, you know. But tell me, have you ever felt jealous of him? Of his memory? Wouldn't it sicken you to meet him out somewhere and hear him with his eyes on your Tekla saying we instead of I? I can't deny that the thought has haunted me. There you are. And you'll never get rid of it. There are discords in life, you see, that never can be resolved. So you'd better just put wax in your ears and work. Work, grow older, and pile up new impressions against the cupboard door, so that the skeleton can't get out. Excuse me for interrupting you, but it's amazing how like Tekla you are sometimes when you're talking. You have a way of blinking your right eye as if you're taking aim, and when you look at me, your eyes have the same effect on me as hers do sometimes. No, really? And then you said that, no, really, in just the indifferent tone that she uses. She says, no, really, very often, too. Perhaps we are distantly related, as all human beings come from the same stock. But it's strange, anyhow, and it will be interesting to meet your wife and see this likeness. But you know, she never picks up an expression from me. She seems rather to avoid my vocabulary, and I've never seen her use any of my mannerisms. Although, married couples are supposed to become rather alike. Yes. And do you know why not? That woman has never loved you. What the devil do you mean? I beg your pardon, but, you see, a woman loves by taking, by receiving, and if she doesn't take anything from a man, she doesn't love him. She has never loved you. Do you think she's unable to love more than once? Yes. One only lets oneself be taken in once. After that, one keeps one's eyes open. You have never been taken in, but you had better beware of those that have. They are dangerous, those. Your words cut into me like knives. I feel something pierced inside me without my being able to prevent it. Yet the piercing is something of a relief, like the lancing of boils which should not come to a head. She has never loved me. Then why did she take me? Tell me first how she came to take you, and if it was you who took her, or her you. God knows if I can answer that. Or say how it came about. It didn't happen all in one day. Shall I try and guess how it came about? You couldn't do that. Oh, with the help of all you have told me about yourself and your wife, I think I can reconstruct the course of events. Listen now, and you'll see. The husband had gone abroad to study, and she was alone. At first she found her freedom rather pleasant. Then she had a sense of emptiness. Yes, I think she felt pretty empty when she had been living by herself for a fortnight. Then he turned up, and gradually the emptiness was filled. By comparison, the absent one began to fade, for the simple reason that he was at a distance. You know, the law of quadratics. But when they felt passion stirring, they were troubled. For themselves and for their consciousnesses and for him. To protect themselves, they sheltered behind the fig leaves, played brother and sister, and the more physical their emotions became, the more spiritual they declared their relationship to be. Brother and sister, how do you know that? I guessed it. Children play at being papa and mama, but when they're older, they play at being brother and sister in order to hide what must be hidden. And then they took a vow of chastity, and then they played hide-and-seek, till they found one another in a dark corner where they were sure of not being seen. But they felt that there was one who could see them in the darkness, and they grew frightened, and in their terror the figure of this absent one began to haunt them, to assume gigantic proportions, to be changed, to become a nightmare which disturbed their amorous slumbers, a creditor who knocked at the doors. They saw this dark hand between theirs as they sat at table. They heard its harsh voice in the stillness of the night, which should have only been broken by the beating of their hearts. He did not stop them from possessing one another, but he spoiled their happiness. And when they discovered his invisible power to spoil their happiness, and at last fled, but fled in vain from the memories that pursued them, and the debts they left behind them, and the public opinion that they dared not face, they hadn't the strength to carry their own guilt. And so a scapegoat had to be brought in from outside to be sacrificed. They were free thinkers, but they hadn't the courage to go and speak openly to him and say, "We love one another." No. They were cowards, and therefore the tyrant had to be slaughtered. Is that right? Yes. But you've forgotten how she improved me, how she inspired me with new thoughts. I hadn't forgotten that. But can you tell me why she didn't improve the other one too, into a free thinker? Oh, he was just an idiot. Yes, of course. He was an idiot. But that's a somewhat ambiguous term. And in her novel, his idiocy seemed to consist mainly of his not understanding her. Excuse the question, but is your wife really so profound? I haven't seen anything profound in her writing. Nor have I. But I must confess that I, too, have some difficulty in understanding her. It's as if the mechanism of our brains didn't interlock, as if something goes to pieces in my head when I try to understand her. Perhaps you're an idiot, too? No, I don't think that. And I nearly always think that she is wrong. Will you read this letter, for instance, that I got today? Takes a letter from his pocketbook and hands it to Gustav. Gustav, glancing through it. The handwriting seems familiar. Rather masculine, don't you think? Well, I have seen one man, at least, who writes something like that. She calls you brother, I see. Do you still play that comedy for each other, with the fig leaves still in place, though withered? Aren't you less formal when you address her? No, I think respect is lost if one does that. I see. Is it to make you respect her, then, that she calls herself your sister? I want to respect her more than I respect myself. I want her to be my better part. Why not be the better part yourself? Surely that would be less tiresome than someone else being it. You don't want to be inferior to your wife. Yes, I do. I enjoy always being a little beneath her. For instance, I taught her to swim, and now I like to hear her boasting that she's better at it and braver than I am. At first I pretended to be weak and timid to give her courage. But one fine day I found that I really was weaker and less brave than she. It was as if she had already taken my courage. Have you taught her anything else? Yes, but it's between ourselves. I taught her how to spell, which she couldn't do before. And do you know what happened then? When she took on our correspondence, I stopped writing, and would you believe it, over the years, with a lack of practice, I've even forgotten bits of my grammar. But do you imagine that she remembers it was I who taught her at the start? No. It's I, of course, who am the idiot now. Ah, so you are an idiot after all. That's a joke, of course. Yes, naturally. But all this is pure cannibalism. Do you know what I mean? Well, savages eat their enemies so that they'll get their strength for themselves. She has eaten your soul, this woman, your courage, your knowledge, and my faith. It was I who urged her to write her first book. Gustav grimacing. Is that so? It was I who boosted her, even when I found her writing cheap. It was I who took her into literary circles, where she could sip honey from ornamental plants. It was I who, through personal influence, kept the critics at bay and blew up her self-confidence, blew so hard that I lost my own breath. I gave until I had nothing left for myself. You know, I'm telling you everything now. It really seems to me that one's soul is pretty extraordinary. When my artistic success threatened to put her in the shade and ruin her reputation, I tried to bolster up her courage by belittling myself and making my work seem inferior to hers. I talked so much about the insignificant part played on the whole by painters, talked so much and invented so many reasons for this that one fine day I found that I had to convince myself of the futility of painting. So all you had to do was to blow down a house of cards. Excuse me for reminding you, but at the beginning of our talk you declared that she never took anything from you. She doesn't now. There's nothing left to take. Now the snake being full vomits. Perhaps she took more than I realized. You can be sure of that. She took when you weren't looking. And that's known as stealing. Perhaps she didn't educate me after all. But you her. Very likely. And she tricked you into believing the opposite. May I ask how she set about your education? Well, first of all... Yes? Well, No, surely it was she. Really, I don't know now. You see? Anyhow, she ate at my faith and then sank me. Until you came and gave me a new faith. In sculpture? Yes. You really believe in it? In this abstract, antiquated art from the childhood of the human race? You believe you can work in pure form in 3 dimensions, in the realistic vein of today, and produce the necessary illusion without color, mind you? Do you really believe you can do that? No. And nor do I. Then why did you say so? Because I pitied you. Yes. I am to be pitied. For now I am bankrupt. Finished. And the worst thing of all is that I haven't got her. What use would she be if you had? She would be what God was for me when I became an atheist. Something I could reverence. Reverence be blowed. Cultivate something else instead. A little wholesome contempt, for example. I can't live without something to look up to, slave. Without a woman to respect and worship. Oh, hell. You'd better take God back if you need something to genuflect to. What an atheist. All fuddled up in this superstition about women. Do you know what the mysterious sphinx-like profundity in your wife really is? It is pure stupidity. Look here, she doesn't even speak correctly. You see, something's wrong with the mechanism. The watch case looks expensive, but the works inside are cheap. It's the skirts that do it, nothing else at all. Put a pair of trousers on her and draw a mustache under her nose with a bit of charcoal. Then sober yourself up and listen to her again, and you'll see how different it sounds. Nothing but a phonograph repeated on your own words and other people's, a bit thinned down. Have you ever looked at a naked woman? Yes, of course you have. A youth with breasts on his chest, an immature man, a child that shot up but not developed, a chronic anemic who has hemorrhages nearly 13 times a year. What can you expect of such a creature? If all you say is true, then how is it that I think of her as my equal? Hallucination. The hypnotizing power of skirts. Or, because you actually have become equal. The leveling process is complete. Her capillary capacity has equalized the water level. Look here. Takes out his watch. We have been talking for 6 hours and your wife ought to be here soon. Hadn't we better stop so that you can have a rest? No, don't leave me. I daren't be alone. It's only for a little while. Then your wife will be here. Yes. She will be here. It's quite extraordinary. I am longing for her to come, yet I'm afraid of her. She caresses me, she's tender, but there is something suffocating about her kisses. Something weakening and numbing. It's as if I were a circus child being pinched behind the scenes by a clown, so as to look rosy to the audience. My dear friend, it gives me great pain to see the state you are in. Without being a physician, I can tell you you are a dying man. One only has to look at your last pictures to perceive this quite clearly. What did you say? How do you mean? The color is a washy blue. Pallid, thin, with the canvas showing through, yellow as a corpse. It's as if I saw your sunken, putty-colored cheeks sticking out. Stop it! Stop it! Well, it's not just my personal opinion. Haven't you seen today's paper? No. It's there on the table. Adolf, stretching out his hand, but not daring to take the paper. Read it. Or shall I? No. I'll go if you like. No. I don't know. I think I'm beginning to hate you, and yet I can't let you go. You pulled me out of the hole where I've fallen through the ice, but as soon as I'm out, you hit me on the head and push me under again. As long as I kept my secrets to myself, I still had my vitals, but now I am empty. There's a picture by some Italian master of a torture, a saint whose intestines are being wound on a winch. The martyr is lying there, watching himself growing thinner and thinner as the roll on the winch gets thicker. Well, it seems to me as if you had swelled since you emptied me out. When you go, you'll take my vitals with you and leave me an empty shell. Oh, the things you imagine. But anyway, isn't your wife coming home and bringing your heart with her? No, not now. Not since you have burnt her to ashes for me. You have left everything else in ashes, my art, my love, my hope, my faith. They were pretty well done already, but they might have been saved. Now it's too late. Incendiary. We have cleared the ground a bit, that's all. Now we will sow the ashes. I hate you. I curse you. That's a good sign. You still have some strength left. Now I'll pull you out of the ice again. Gustav, rising. Look at me. Adolf, gazing at Gustav. Now you are looking at me again with those eyes that draw me to you. And now listen to me. Yes, but talk about yourself. Don't talk about me anymore. I'm like an open wound and cannot bear to be tortured. But there's nothing to say about me. I am a teacher of dead languages and a widower, and that's all there is to it. Now take my hand. Adolf, doing so. What terrific power you have. It's like taking hold of an electric generator. And remember, I have been as weak as you are now. Stand up. Adolf rises and falls on Gustav's neck. My bones are as weak as a baby's. And my mind is all at sea. Walk about a bit. I can't. You must, or I'll hit you. Adolf, straightening himself up. You'll what? I said I'll hit you. Adolf starts back from him, furious. You! That's better. You've got some blood to your brain and your self-confidence has come back. Now for some electric current. Where is your wife? Where is she? Yes. She's at a meeting. Are you quite certain? Quite. What sort of a meeting? An orphanage committee. Did you part friends? No, not friends. Enemy, then. What did you say that made her so furious? You're uncanny. You terrify me. How did you know? It's quite simple. There are 3 known factors, and from them I can deduce the unknown. What did you say to her? I said only 2 words, but they were terrible, and I regret them very much. You shouldn't regret. What were these words? I said, you old flirt. What else? I didn't say anything else. That's what you tell me, but you're forgetting the rest. Perhaps because you daren't remember it. You put it in a secret drawer, but you're not going to bring it out. I don't remember what, but I know what you said. This. You ought to be ashamed of flirting, considering you are so old and that you can't get any more lovers. Did I say that? I suppose I did. But how on earth can you know about it? I heard her telling the story on the boat on my way here. Who to? To the 4 youths she was with. Of course, she always did have a fancy for innocent youths, there's no harm in that, so as to play brother and sister instead of papa and mama. You've seen her then? Yes, I have. But you have never seen her when you weren't seeing her. Seen her, I mean, when you weren't there. And that's why, you follow me, a husband can never know his wife. Have you got a picture of her? Mystified, Adolf takes a photograph from his pocketbook. You weren't there when this was taken? No. Look at it. Is it like the portrait you painted of her? No. The features are the same, but the expression is different. But you can't see that because you forced your own image on her in between. Look at this as a painter now, without considering the original. What does it represent? I can't see anything but a study of a coquette out to attract. Do you see that cynical expression of the mouth, which you are never allowed to see? Do you see those glances aimed at a man who is not you? Do you see how low the dress is cut, how cunningly the hair is combed up, and how the sleeve is managed to slip back? Yes, I do see it now. Beware, my boy. What of? Her revenge. Don't forget that when you said she couldn't attract a man, you wounded her in the most vital and sacred spot. If you had said that what she had wrote was trash, she would have laughed at your bad taste. But as it is, believe you me, it will not be her fault if she hasn't taken her revenge already. I must know. Find out. Find out. Use your eyes and I'll help if you like. Well, as I'm going to die anyway, let it come. Now's as good a time as any other. What are we to do? First, for a piece of information. Hasn't your wife any point that's specially vulnerable? Scarcely. She's like a cat with 9 lives. The hoot of a steamer is heard. Ah, that was the steamer hooting in the sound. She will be here any moment. I must go down and meet her. No. You stay here. You've got to be rude. If she has a clear conscience, you'll get a hailstorm about your ears. If she's guilty, she'll cover you with caresses. Are you quite sure of that? Not quite, for the hair sometimes doubles back. But I'll look out for that. Points to the door on the right. I'll take up my position in my room there and watch while you play your scene in here. And when you've finished yours, we'll change roles. I'll go into the cage and engage the serpent, while you take your place at the keyhole. Afterwards, we'll meet in the park and compare notes. But stand up for yourself. If you begin to weaken, I shall knock twice on the floor with a chair. Very well. But don't go away. I must know that you're in the room there. You can take my word for it that I shall be. But don't be alarmed later on when you watch me dissecting a human soul and exposing its entrails on the table. They say it's rather hard for a novice to take. But when you've seen it once, it doesn't worry you. But one thing you must remember. Not a single word about meeting me or having made any new acquaintance during her absence. Not one word. I'll seek out her vulnerable point myself. Hush! She's already here. She's in her room. She's humming. That means she's in a rage. Now pull yourself together and sit down there in your chair. Then she'll have to sit on the sofa, and I shall be able to watch you both at the same time. It's only an hour till dinner time, and no new guests have arrived, or the bell would have rung. That means we shall be alone, I'm sorry to say. Are you such a coward? I am nothing. Yes, I am afraid of what is going to happen now. But I can't stop it happening. The stone is rolling, But it wasn't the last drop of water that set it rolling. Nor the first one either. It was all the drops together. Let it roll, then. There will be no peace until it has. Goodbye for now. Adolf nods. Exit Gustav. Adolf stands still holding the photograph. Then he tears it up and throws the pieces under the table. He sits down on his chair, pulls nervously at his tie, runs his fingers through his hair, fidgets with his lapels, and so on.